Today marks the 1 year anniversary of the 2024 general election, and of course, with it, essentially the 1 year anniversary of the Labour government. I mean, one can say it wasn't really formed till the next day, blah, 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 but you get what I mean. July 4th, 2024, we had a general election in this country called by then Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, and everybody knows he got rained on. It was a funny moment, sort of set the tone for the whole thing. Tories got crushed down to 121 seats. The Labour Party ended up with 400 and whatever the hell it was, 412, 411, and suddenly Keir Starmer had a Blair-like majority. I think the funny thing about it, really looking back on it, was it could have been worse for the Tories. The Tories actually clung on in a host of seats. They could have easily been down to 60 or 70. So oddly, the 121 they ended up with was on luck. Since then, we've had Keir Starmer's first year as Prime Minister, which I think anybody other than the most devout Labour person or the most devout Starmer fan would say has been a real failure. It's been, I think disastrous probably a bit of a hyperbole. But it's not been good. It's been pretty bad. You know, if you were rating it on a scale of 1 to 10, you'd probably give it a 2 and feel like you were being slightly generous. It hasn't really worked. And I'm saying this, will just hold my hand up and say I voted for Labour at the last general election. I mostly did it to get rid of the Conservative Party, which I felt was a total shambles. I likened it at the time and still would do. The Conservative Party was like a drunk driver driving around the M25 with a shotgun pointed out of the window, driving drunk and shooting at car tires and possibly causing some fatalities along the way. A total disaster that just needed to be taken off the road as quickly as possible. I think all this stuff about if Sunak had been in charge now, we'd all be fine. No, we wouldn't. Not because Sunak himself is terrible particularly, but he surrounded himself with idiots and they advised him badly and he listened to them, and that's where it all went wrong. But anyway, I'm not here to talk about Rishi Sunak or the Conservative Party. I'm here to talk about Keir Starmer and his Labour government. Right, so worth pointing out that, me saying that it's been really bad is supported statistically. YouGov did a poll this week asking for government approval rating, and the public came back saying -52. Just to give you an idea what that was 14% approving, 66% disapproving. So 14% of the country thinks that Labour are doing a good job in government. 14% is dire. I mean, it'd be terrible after 10 years in government, but at least you'd say, well, it's been 10 years of government, people are sick of you. After 1 year, insane. Sorry. So what this video is I'm not just going to sit here and mindlessly take pot shots at Starmer and his government. What I'm going to try and do is break down why I think they've gone wrong, or where they have gone wrong and why. And I boil it down to 3 things because it's easier to do this in lists. People like lists. Lists are easy to digest as opposed to just a block of information. So here are the 3 reasons that I think it's gone terribly for Starmer in his first year as Prime Minister. The first one I think is really crucial, and probably the central reason why it's gone really wrong, is they thought the civil service runs the country, not the government. Essentially, what they've bought into is the right's blob theory. So this idea that, the right have this theory that the reason everything's screwed up in the country and you can never get anything done and you can never reform anything properly and why Brexit didn't work and all these other things is essentially the civil service just sits there like a blob and it has too much power to get out of the way or let you do anything as a government. But it's essentially just sort of massless. It doesn't have any ideas. It doesn't have any direction. It just stands in the way of progress, right? So basically the right thought the blob runs the country. Weirdly, the Labour Party, Starmer and those around him, bought into the same theory, but thought it was a good thing. So basically they were like, well, the civil service runs the country. And they're a bunch of really clever people, and they just run things. So basically all we have to do is get in there, offer them a few parameters. They offer us a range of solutions. We pick the best ones. This will be a piece of piss. Now, I'm exaggerating for effect. I don't think Starmer ever sat down at his shadow cabinet a shadow cabinet meeting and people actually said that, they probably didn't even really think it one-on-one, but essentially that became the guiding principle, whether they knew it or not. They might have known it, they might not have. My point is, it's clear that that was the essence of the strategy to run the country. The civil service will do it. We don't need to do a lot. We just need to chill out, basically, and let them do their thing and appear at stuff and, cut ribbons or, the ceremonial crap. And it'll all be fine. And in fact, one of the reasons that the Tories screwed up as badly as they did was because they were trying to do too much. They were trying to get in the way. They were too ideological. They were constantly trying to do stuff. If they just got out of the way and let the civil service run the country, everything would be fine. And of course, we're seeing that that isn't the case. What the civil service is a group of people who can mobilize and do a bunch of stuff, but they don't run the country. You need to run the country yourself. You need ministers to come up with an idea, a plan, a vision. They have to tell the civil service what to do. Otherwise, what the civil service will do, and we've seen this with Rachel Reeves, right, is they will take off the stuff at the back of the shelf, some stuff they wanted to do for ages, like, hey, do you know what? Here's a good one. Why don't we raise employers' national insurance contributions? Because you know what? That doesn't hurt the working person. And hey, Rachel, you said you don't want to hurt the working person. So we're telling you this is a way to raise taxes. Hey, look, it'll raise whatever they said it will raise. 5 billion, 10 billion. And she goes, ooh, okay. They can come up with stuff like that. That isn't vision or strategy. And what happens is when that collides with reality, you get what you've got, which is businesses are annoyed. It hasn't actually raised that much money. People are just hiring less. So there's less money in the economy. You can't get growth. All these things, right? Which Rachel Reeves should have known. And when the civil service said, let's do this, she should have said no. But again, this is what I'm saying. I think they thought the civil service runs the country and we just need to let them get on with it. So that's point one. I think the second reason it's gone so wrong for Starmer and the Labour government is they just came from a basic misunderstanding of the Labour Party and how it works. One of the things that's commented on a lot that I think is correct is Starmer's lack of experience in politics. He hasn't been an MP for ages and ages. In fact, he's been an MP for a decade. He didn't come up through, he was never obviously involved in the Blair Brown governments. He doesn't actually have that much on the ground, day-to-day political experience. And I think as a result, he doesn't really understand the party that he leads and how some of the stuff that he was going to want to do was going to be a huge problem for him and getting it through his party. And I don't think he really reckoned with that until it was too late, for instance. And the welfare bill, which has obviously gone through this week in zombie form after it had been stripped of all of its actual substance, after the backbenchers had a go at it and essentially said that they weren't going to budge, and the whole thing was a fiasco of party management. And I really lay that at Starmer's door because I think he just didn't really understand the Labour Party and how it works. He didn't really understand that a lot of Labour MPs are really, really left-wing. Lots of them are really out of touch with people, reality, the country. And this falls on Starmer as well because they did so much to try and get the NEC back from the Corbynites, all that stuff. There was a certain amount of party management that they worked hard on and did. But in terms of MP selection, it just seemed like they sort of let the wind blow where it would go, whereas they really should have tried to engineer a PLP, a Parliamentary Labour Party, that was more in line with what they wanted to do. Instead, they sort of ended up with a lot of kind of, I'm really sorry to say this, but left-wing doorknobs, that it looks like they're not going to be able to whip to do the stuff that they want to do, which essentially makes his massive majority illusory. It's not real, because actually if these people are not going to just vote for the program, most of the time at least, and actually they're going to stand in the way of everything that you want to do. Anything that's a cost-cutting measure, anything to try and balance the books, anything to try and get the public spending under control, his party will stand in the way of it. And there's nothing he can do between now and the general election to fix it, because he had to have fixed it before the election happened. He had to have somehow, as much as he could have, taken control of the selection process, and he didn't. And he's just ended up with a lot of people who, even if they're not particularly left-wing or out of touch, what are they worried about? A lot of them are worried about losing their seats to Islamist independents. So of course they're going to be worried about stuff, and of course they're going to vote with that in mind. Because you really would have had to have got, people who were really on board with the program, at least a few hundred of them, at least. And what you end up with is the first time he tries to do something radical in terms of cutting public spending, his party torpedoes it. And again, this is Starmer's fault. He didn't think about this before the general election, or he didn't give it anywhere near enough thought or strategic input. And he's ended up with a party that just isn't going to do what he wants to do. I think a part of what Starmer's whole pitch is, look, the Tories have gone mad. They can't do anything. They're completely useless. Vote for the Labour Party, because we are essentially the old Conservative Party and the Labour Party put into one. And that worked as an electoral strategy. The problem being is that when he got into government, he soon found out that he isn't the Labour Party isn't some amalgamation of the Conservative Party and the Labour Party. It's the Labour Party. And the people are going to vote like Labour MPs. And unless you've really thought about who you've put in those seats, how you're going to manage them, who are the whips going to be that are going to get this under control, how are you going to get some of the more right-wing stuff through, it just felt like that was never thought about. And basically, we're going to shove this down their throat, and we're going to see them off, and we're essentially going to play chicken with the PLP, and we're sure we're going to win. And in fact, what happened was they tried that, and they lost. They lost. And I'm not surprised. I think there was always a very low percentage chance of that sort of let's just run at them and see what happens that was ever going to work. And it's failed. And now that it's failed in year one, I mean, just under the wire year one, but year one nonetheless, what does he do for the next 4 years? What happens? And there's a lot of people on the left who are going, oh, this is brilliant, because actually what this is going to do is this is going to force Starmer to go more left wing, and it's going to be all this and this. It's not. What it's going to do, most likely, is they're going to be a bit of a zombie government, despite having a massive majority, which is ridiculous. But that gets me to point 3 in terms of why I think it's gone wrong for Starmer. Because ultimately, the problem that Starmer's got is he has no vision for government. And I know this gets repeated all the time, and it's become like a Westminster talking point. Oh, Starmer has no vision, he has no vision. And people go, well, who cares about vision? Why doesn't he just get on with running the country, and who cares? Because if you do that, what you end up with is the managerialism, or the attempted managerialism, that we've had over this past year. And you end up with, let the civil service run the country, it'll be fine. And you end up with, let's just do what we want, oh, the Parliamentary Labour Party will be fine. If you don't have a vision that you can sell both to your party and to the country, you end up where Starmer has ended up, right? Again, if your electoral strategy is essentially we're going to be the Conservative and the Labour Party rolled into one, you have to figure out a way that you can govern like that. Otherwise, lots of those people who voted for you in a lot of those northern seats that went, the old northern wall, they're not going to vote for you next time. They're going to be pissed off. They're going to feel like they got sold a bag of dud goods. They're going to go for reform. They're going to go for Farage. That's what they're going to do. And the polling tells us that. The local elections tells us that's very likely. That's where we're headed. Because basically, he presented a vision, such as it was, and it wasn't even really a vision, but it was a half-baked vision that he couldn't deliver on. And now what's he left with? It isn't like it's based on anything. Like, okay, maybe you think these comparisons that I'm about to make are unfair, but I don't think they are, because actually, if I'm not going to compare Starmer to Thatcher, which I'm about to, and Blair, who am I comparing him to? What? David Cameron, who was basically undone by his own lack of vision, which led to the EU referendum and his whole premiership collapsing. Or worse than Cameron, because Cameron was probably, realistically, the best prime minister we've had, probably since Blair, or at least since Brown. I mean, has there been anybody better than Cameron since? No. And that isn't really a compliment to Cameron particularly, but just because all the rest of the prime ministers since have been so bloody awful. May was awful. She's been reclaimed because I think she's partly been reclaimed because Johnson was so bad and Truss was so bad and etc. But no, she was awful. She was terrible. And again, she was undone by no vision. Her vision was essentially, if I just say Brexit means Brexit a bunch of times, that will somehow magically manifest itself into everything being all right. And it didn't. It came completely crashing down around her ears quite quickly, actually. Johnson had no vision either. His Johnson was, well, I'm Winston Churchill because I say I am and because I wrote a book about him once. Which, again, doesn't work in reality. And essentially didn't get over the fact that he's a very lazy man who just thought he could kind of float along. And in a way, like, sort of like Starmer, in a sense, thought, well, other people will run the country. I'll just give some speeches and look good. And that's what a prime minister does, right? No, that's not how the Westminster system works, mate. Not how it works at all. And that's how you end up in these situations. That's how we keep ending up in these situations. We keep ending up with these prime ministers who have no vision for the country and don't know what they want to do and don't know how to fix anything. And what I mean, I want to be specific about this. I mean, they don't know how to fix things even in theory. They don't even have a working theory of change. Never mind whether that theory of change would work or not, because probably it would, even if someone had a great theory of change, it would buck up against reality because we live in very difficult times. It's very difficult to govern. And people keep pointing this out. It's very difficult to govern now. Yes, it is. But it's impossible to govern if you don't have any vision for how to do it. You're not even starting with a theory of how to do it. I mean, think about it, right? It's like being a football manager, right? You're up against Real Madrid, right? What's your best shot? You play your best players, you play your best, and you play them in the best position, and you play the best formation that you can, and you have a definitive idea, at least on paper, of how you're going to, what will give you the best chance of beating Real Madrid. And you might still get tonked by Real Madrid, but at the very least, if you've had a strategy, you've got a shot. You've got a shot. You just never know. They have an off night. You get a few good passes. You defend well against them. You get a fluky goal. Who knows? But the guarantee is, if you go out there, if you get 11 random guys and you say, just play wherever. I don't know. You figure it out when you're on the pitch. I don't know. Just play total football or something. You figure it out. You're probably going to lose 45-0 because you don't have a strategy. You don't even have a vision that works on paper. You don't even have a theory of something that might work, that gives you the best shot of actually things working out for you. And that's, I mean, Starmer is a football manager, right? He's like, it's like the civil servants are the players, right? And they're all kind of standing around going, okay, Gaff, where do I play? Am I up front? Am I the keeper? What do you want me to do? And he just doesn't even think he needs to do that much. It's like, oh, just give him a little pep talk. All right, lads, you'll do all right. It'll all work out. There'll be some orange slices at halftime. And they're all sort of going, okay, well, whatever. He's the one who's going to get the sack. So let's just do our best and see what happens. And we're just being governed by people who fundamentally don't understand how the British system works. It comes back to all this sort of, there is some intersectionality going on here between the three reasons why they have failed. Of course, there would be. A lot of it, they don't have a strategy because they didn't think they needed one, because they thought the civil service runs the country, and now that has been proven not to be the case, they don't really know what to do. And we're back to the same thing. It's the same crap we heard with Boris Johnson. Oh, we just need to get rid of Morgan McSweeney. He's the big spat in number 10. He's basically Starmer's head honcho in number 10. Or if we just get rid of him and we get a new group of people around Starmer, everything will work out fine. And no, that is rarely the problem. In fact, the funny thing is, the one time it really was the problem was Sunak, and they didn't do it. So amazing, right? We are where we are. Anyway, those are the three reasons I think that Starmer's first year as Prime Minister has been a bit of a disaster, at the very least, hugely disappointing to those of us who aren't Labour people or aren't willing to, endlessly give them breaks and who just want the country to be run well. It's been a huge disappointment. Can he turn it around? A few months ago, I would have said, I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt and say that I think that he can. I think after seeing the shambles of this welfare bill this week, I'm more inclined to say no. I think it's going to be a failure. I think he's going to fail. What that means exactly, I don't know. But we could be drifting for a while here, folks. I mean, we could have Keir Starmer as a sort of zombie prime minister and Kemi Badenoch as a sort of zombie leader of the opposition. And all that's going to happen is the Reform Party are just going to clean up in terms of by-elections and local elections and devolved elections. And they're going to keep going up in the polls until we all sort of look at it and go, you know what? Reform are on like 42% and like Labour on 15% and the Tories are on like 8%. I think maybe we should have thought about this a bit more, and instead of just taking all these pot shots and saying that Farage is a flash in the pan and it's all going to go away magically, maybe we should have just thought about this a little bit more and and not had her head up our asses. But I digress. I'm Nick Tyrone, neoliberal centrist dad. Thank you for joining me. Obviously, if you got this far, it'd be lovely if you could like the video, subscribe to the channel. I'm going to just be putting these things out, here and there as we go along. Love to hear from you. Leave a comment below, and I'll see you soon. Bye.